Bonjour tout le monde. Je veux commencer par remercier la Première ministre Meloni et les Italiens de leur accueil cette semaine. Dans un monde incertain, c'est important d'être ici pour renforcer nos relations avec nos alliés. C'est en travaillant ensemble qu'on peut le mieux défendre nos valeurs et trouver des solutions pour affronter les grands défis auxquels on fait face. With our allies this week here in Italy, we work together to address the many different challenges our world is facing today. With wars in the Ukraine and in the Middle East, with climate change affecting our lives, we need responsible leadership. This is what Canada is here to offer. We also discussed economic opportunities that will help all of us advance economic development and create good jobs around the world, including in Canada. Summits like these are an important moment to coordinate our efforts with friends and allies, and they matter to Canadians because security, prosperity, and stability benefit us all. On security, President Zelensky joined us here in Italy this week, and I made it clear that Canada will keep supporting Ukraine until victory. I've long advocated for new and innovative ways to support Ukraine and impose costs on Russia for its invasion. 2 years ago, Canada suggested freezing Russian central bank assets. That's exactly what the G7 did. Now, to bring forward the future interest earnings from frozen Russian sovereign assets, the G7 will provide loans to Ukraine. As the G7 finalizes the delivery of the extraordinary revenue acceleration loans, Canada stands prepared to contribute $5 billion Canadian in funding. These loans would provide Ukraine with approximately $69 billion Canadian as it continues to defend its freedom, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. On top of this, Canada also announced new sanctions on 11 individuals and 16 entities who supply key technology and electrical components in support of Russia's war of aggression. And I also want to mention that we're in the process of delivering 4 armored medical evacuation vehicles to support Ukraine's armed forces. This is the first shipment of 50 armored combat support vehicles, all built in Canada in London, Ontario. Of course, we know that war is not only ravaging Ukraine. This week, with G7 allies, we also discussed the crisis in the Middle East. Canada is extremely concerned by the scale of the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. Canada has been clear on calling for an immediate ceasefire, for the release of all hostages, for a significant and sustained increase in humanitarian assistance, and to an enduring end to this crisis. So far, our country has provided $165 million in humanitarian funding for things like food, water, and medical assistance. We all need peace and stability in the Middle East, and Canada will continue to support efforts to achieve a just and lasting peace in the region based on a two-state solution. Évidemment, on ne peut pas parler de sécurité, de prospérité et de stabilité sans s'attaquer au changement climatique. J'ai toujours été bien clair avec nos alliés que c'est une question que le Canada prend très au sérieux. Et c'est pourquoi on agit avec des mesures significatives. Climate change is having an impact on food security. So to support vulnerable countries, especially in the Americas, Sub-Saharan Africa and Asia, we're allocating $200 million to the International Fund for Agriculture Development. In the Indo-Pacific region, we're helping mobilize private capital toward climate change mitigation and adaptation projects by delivering a $360 million repayable contribution to the Asian Development Bank. Le Canada fait aussi sa part dans le cadre du partenariat en matière d'infrastructure et d'investissement. Jeudi, on a souligné plusieurs mesures qu'on met de l'avant pour travailler avec le secteur privé afin de répondre à la demande en infrastructure dans les pays en voie de développement. Ces mesures comprennent 720 millions de dollars pour FinDev afin d'appuyer le développement durable, ce qui s'ajoute aux 750 millions de dollars annoncés en 2022 pour soutenir le mandat mondial de l'institution. Tout ce qu'on fait, que ce soit pour aider à la transition verte, pour l'égalité des genres ou pour les objectifs de développement durable des Nations unies, C'est dans le but de bâtir un monde plus prospère, plus stable et plus sécuritaire. Et ça, c'est bon pour tous, y compris pour la prospérité et la sécurité des Canadiens. This was a very productive summit. I want to thank again our Italian hosts. We're focused on fairness for everyone, on creating good jobs and economic growth, and Canada will, of course, continue to be a voice for peace, stability, and democracy. I look forward to the Summit for Peace in Ukraine in Switzerland today and tomorrow, where we'll work with partners on a plan to achieve a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace for Ukraine. And I very much look forward to hosting next year's G7 Summit in Canada, in Kananaskis, Alberta. Next year will be the 50th year since the first summit and the second held in beautiful Kananaskis. Can't wait to share all the glory of the Canadian Rockies with our friends and allies. Je suis maintenant très heureux de prendre vos questions.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We'll now begin the media availability. 20 minutes, one question, one follow-up. First question goes to the Canadian press.
Hi, Prime Minister. Italy said ahead of the summit that Ukraine and Gaza would be discussed with equal importance. But the G7 leaders announced a clear deliverable with the Ukraine loan, swift action. Why was there no deliverable on Gaza, given the humanitarian crisis you say there is?
The G7 leaders are united in wanting to see the implementation of the U.S. and UN peace plan, the immediate ceasefire, the return of all hostages, and we underscored repeatedly the need to continue delivering humanitarian assistance, as we all are. Canada is indeed one of the significant donors to UNRWA and humanitarian aid in the region, in the crisis. We will continue, including continuing to work with outreach partners like we did in the afternoon yesterday on this important issue. We need to bring together not just the region but the world in calling for that two-state solution and implementing the steps towards it, and that's exactly what we'll continue to do.
Pope Francis has found himself in controversy recently over using a derogatory term to refer to gay men. During your meeting with the Pope, did you bring up the issue of LGBTQ rights?
We talked about AI, we talked about a range of things, but we didn't talk about that.
Next question.
Bonjour, M. Trudeau, Louis Blouin de Radio-Canada. J'aimerais vous entendre sur votre échange avec M. Modi hier. Qu'est-ce que vous lui avez dit précisément sur l'ingérence étrangère et quelles sont vos conditions pour un retour à la normale avec le premier ministre indien?
Ben, justement, ce que j'ai dit et ce qu'on s'est dit, c'est qu'il y a des grands enjeux sur lesquels nous allons travailler ensemble. Je pense que c'est important pour les citoyens dans nos deux pays d'être engagés et on va l'être. I highlighted that there are important issues that we need to work together on, and we will do that.
Trudeau, sur l'Ukraine, le sommet qui se déroule en Suisse à partir d'aujourd'hui, ça sert à quoi un sommet sur la paix si la Russie n'est pas là?
Je pense que le fait qu'il y a autant de pays qui vont participer démontre à quel point il y a un désir clair de la part de la communauté internationale pour voir la paix en Ukraine. Je suis content de participer et même le Canada est en train de l'idée sur la préoccupation que nous avons tous pour le retour des enfants ukrainiens qui ont été enlevés par la Russie. C'est une tragédie et une violation de la loi internationale sur laquelle nous sommes en train de travailler avec bien des partenaires et alliés. Mais nous allons tous faire tout ce qu'on peut pour mettre fin à cette guerre, que la Russie peut terminer demain si elle décide de respecter la loi internationale et se retire du territoire ukrainien.
Glenn McGregor, City News. On the $5 billion loan guarantee for Ukraine, you're putting Canadian taxpayers on the hook for a lot of money here. How confident are you that that money will be recouped? And can you talk about kind of the risks of that not happening?
Russia invaded Ukraine and has caused billions of dollars worth of damage to infrastructure, to individuals, and on top of killing too many Ukrainians. We think that Russia should be paying for that, and that's why the freezing of Russian assets and the use of the profits from those assets to support Ukraine in its fight against Russia is the right thing to do.
On the summit that you're going to in Switzerland later today, Joe Biden won't be there. He's going to a campaign event in California instead. Obviously, Vladimir Putin's not going to be there. What are your expectations for what could come out of this? And is it really going to make any tangible difference to this?
There are close to 100 countries that have chosen to be part of this peace process. We need to see peace and stability in Ukraine as we need to see it around the world, and this is part of the effort that we all undertake to engage. I'm going to be focusing in particular on the issue of children stolen from Ukraine by Russia who need to be returned.
Good morning, Ashley Burke, CBC News. During that interaction that you had with India's Prime Minister yesterday, who initiated that interaction? And you mentioned that you said that you need to work on important issues. What are those issues you raised? And what did Modi say in response? I
think you can understand I'm not going to get into the details of this issue. There's important but sensitive issues that we need to follow up on. But this was a commitment to work together in the coming times to deal with some very important issues.
Did Modi give you any sort of assurance that he will cooperate with the investigation into the killing of a Canadian Sikh activist? And did you raise that?
Like I said, I'm not going to get into it further, but there are important issues that we need to work on, and we will.
Prime Minister, good morning. Graphic Jukanian, CBC News. Are you going to invite Narendra Modi to the G7 in Canada next year if he keeps denying the allegations of his government's involvement in the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar and the foreign interference allegations into Canadian elections?
I can appreciate the keenness with which Canadians are looking forward to next year's G7. However, Italy continues to be the president of this G7 for the rest of this year, and I look forward to working with Prime Minister Meloni and all my G7 partners on the broad range of issues that we've talked about. I will have more to say about next year's G7 when we assume the presidency next year.
Okay, and speaking of Italy, how can you so strongly advocate for abortion back home and then come here and put your name to a final communique that avoids the word entirely in watering down the language? And will you raise this with Giorgia Meloni in your upcoming bilateral meeting?
There are clear commitments in the communique to defending sexual and reproductive rights. There is important work that we're going to continue to do. Obviously, this matters deeply to Canada and Canadians, and we will continue to defend sexual health and reproductive rights, as well as women's rights, as well as LGBT rights everywhere necessary. Il y a eu des engagements clairs dans le communiqué du G7 sur les droits et la santé reproductive, sur les droits des femmes et sur la communauté LGBT. On va continuer en tant que pays, en tant que G7, d'être là pour défendre les droits de tout le monde.
Hi, Prime Minister Brian Platt with Bloomberg. Prime Minister Modi was invited here. He played a pretty prominent role yesterday. He was center stage in the family photo. Given the accusations that you've made in the U.S. court case, has he paid any diplomatic price for this? Because it seems like he was welcomed here with open arms.
I think there is a clear understanding that we need to continue to engage across and around the world with various partners, even as we highlight challenges, as we stand up for the rule of law and the principles that drive the G7. We need to engage with a broad range of partners, and that's exactly what we did during the outreach session yesterday.
I also wanted to ask you about French President Macron has talked about building a coalition of countries to put trainers in Ukraine, military trainers potentially. What is Canada's view on that, and have you talked about that with the French president?
During this G7, we had many conversations about Ukraine, about how we need to continue to hold Russia to account for its illegal invasion, to make sure that Russia actually pays for the damage that it has done to Ukraine, the murder of so many civilians. We're going to continue to make sure Ukraine is held to account. Russia is held to account for what it's doing in Ukraine.
I'm Mr. Trudeau. Mackenzie Gray with Global News. Are there currently any MPs in your caucus that are named in the NSICOP report to be wittingly or semi-wittingly participants in foreign interference?
The issue of foreign interference is one that this government has taken incredibly seriously since 2015. We brought in the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians over the objections of the Conservative Party and indeed the strenuous resistance of the Harper government for years. We brought in a renewed NSIRA for oversight over our national security instances, and we created specific bodies of experts, of top civil servants to ensure the integrity of our elections. We've also called a number of different reports, including an ongoing report on foreign interference that we're working with right now to see how they can follow up on the NSICOP report.
We've heard from Mr. Singh and Ms. May. They have both said that there are no members of their party who are named in the report. So I'll ask you again, are there any current Liberal caucus members named in the NSICOP report that are wittingly or semi-wittingly participants in foreign interference?
I will allow Mr. Singh and Ms. May to speak for themselves.
Last question.
Hi, it's Annie Bertrand-Oliver with CTV National News. Just going back on that, but why can't you say any more? Singh and May have both talked about this report and provided substantially more details than you have. So why are you unable to provide any details about what is in this NSICOP report?
I think it's important that Canadians have confidence in our ability collectively as a democracy to defend the institutions and the processes around our elections and our democracy. That is why officials are engaging with the foreign interference inquiry to see how they can follow up on the NSICOP report. Je pense que c'est important que les Canadiens puissent avoir confiance dans notre capacité de contrer l'ingérence étrangère. C'est pour ça que nous travaillons avec la Commission sur l'ingérence étrangère pour voir comment ils peuvent faire un suivi sur le rapport du Comité des parlementaires.
You're talking about how Canadians should have confidence in the work that's being done around foreign interference and to prevent that from happening. But Dominic LeBlanc, your own minister, has said that the government disagreed with the committee's interpretation of some of the intelligence. So what are some of the problems with this intelligence, and do you agree with that assessment?
We made clear some of the concerns we have with the way the NSICOP drew its conclusions. I think that is an important part of the process. The NSICOP, the National Security Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, exists so that parliamentarians from all parties can have full access to the work that our national security agencies are doing. That's an important step that wouldn't have happened if the Conservative Party had remained in power. We were able to create that over the objections of Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party. So we welcome the work that they're doing, but of course when it comes to intelligence, there are important bodies like the Foreign Interference Inquiry that is tasked to look at this, and we will continue our work with them.
That concludes today's press conference. Thank you, Prime Minister.